I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff. Today we're going to make a really nice piece of furniture that hides a 4-player arcade. Today we're back here at the office. This is our front room, our hangout room, our conference room. You may recognize our gaming table that we made recently. And we've also got the big wall back here to cover up the window. In those videos, we asked you for some ideas of what we should do in this space, and you absolutely came through in the comments. One of my favorite suggestions for this space over here was to add some arcade cabinets. But we've made 2-player arcade cabinets before. You can totally make one of your own, we've got plans for them, but not everybody has a spouse that wants to have a full-size arcade cabinet in their living room. So today, we're gonna make something that goes right here that would fit in anybody's living room. So the plan is to make a really nice looking piece of furniture to go here that anybody would wanna have in their living room. You can mount a TV over top of it, but the real purpose is to hide a 4-person arcade cabinet in plain sight. So the first thing we have to do is head to the shop and build the basic structure, and then we'll talk about how it's gonna go together. I've got all the pieces for the white section of this cut out of melamine. We're using melamine for a few reasons. The big one is the cost. A sheet of this is half the price of a sheet of plywood right now. So it's just easier to go this way, cheaper this way. But it's also going to end up being white anyway. So since it has a plastic surface that's white on the outside, all we have to do is add some edge banding and it will be totally white. A couple words of warning though. This stuff is really, really heavy, so you probably need help lifting a sheet, and once you cut it, it gets kind of sharp, so you should probably wear gloves. And in addition to that, it handles a screw all right, but then if you try to take that screw out, it'll kind of fall apart. So you can either go to dowels or just put a screw in and leave it alone. We are going to be making plans for this thing, so we've already got a cut list, which is how I got all the different pieces cut. So now we can just take the basic box parts and start building the carcass. I'm going to be using just butt joints to put this together because a lot of this stuff is going to end up being covered up later on. Since this thing is big and heavy, I'm building it face down on the ground so that the shelf can be justified to the front. And to make sure it's the right amount off the bottom, I'm using the toe kick as a spacer. And so I'm just going to set it down here on the ground, make sure that it is flush with the bottom edge. And then that forces the bottom panel to be in the right place, and I can drive in the screws from the outside. So I've got the outside shell done, but now I need to work on the interior support pieces, the ones that are like creating the sturdiness for the entire thing. And I've got kind of a weird situation where I need 3 pieces that need to cram together and then they go inside this outer edge. Let's go to the whiteboard and let me give you a better idea what I'm talking about, because this is a little confusing to look at. Upright, this is what it's going to look like. We've got the outer box and then we have this kind of cross piece that's inside, and this is what the actual pieces look like down here. So we've got this long shelf that needs to be sandwiched between the vertical pieces. So I'm going to put some dowels in this joint and in this joint, but from the side I have to make sure that those dowels don't run into each other. So they need to be offset a little bit between the top and the bottom. So I'm going to show you how to do dowels on one piece of them, but just know that this is kind of where we're headed. We're just going to use these little 5/16 dowels. And the way to do this is to have a matching dowel center. So you can drill a hole that's this size and then you drop one of these dowel centers in that hole. It gives you a nice point that you can press to the mating piece of wood, and it makes a little indentation, and then you can use that point to drill a matching hole. Once you've got those 2 holes in line, you can just put in the dowel in one of them and slide the pieces together with some glue, and your pieces should line up. So we're going to do this, and the first step is to put these 2 pieces together. Remember I said that the lines needed to be offset. So I'm going to make sure that I put a dowel on these lines on this piece and on these lines on this piece. So far I've got all of the fixed pieces, all the stationary pieces put in place, and you can tell it's just a normal shelf. In fact, you could put a face frame on this right now and have a really nice credenza to put underneath your TV. We're gonna add some drawers in this section. Then we're gonna add false drawer fronts up here to hide the arcade controls. We'll talk about that later on. Down here, we're planning on doing adjustable shelves. So we're gonna put in some shelf pins so we can make those different heights. And then there's gonna be a false back on here to hide the empty cavity in the back section. That empty cavity back there is so that we can manage cables, because our plan is to put retro game consoles on these and have them plugged up all the time. So all of the cables will run back into the back section and be hooked up to the TV. You won't see any of that stuff. Obviously, you may not need that back there, but it is a good way to take advantage of some space that's behind the cabinet. So next up for me, I need to drill holes for the adjustable shelves and then start working on some drawers. This is a shelf pin jig, super easy to use, and basically you just line it up with the front edge of where you're gonna put the pins, and then you decide where you want the first hole to be. It comes with a drill bit with a collar, so you just drill that first hole. Then you've got the hole, and it also comes with a pin, so you put this pin in that hole. Then you use that pin as a reference point for the next height. Then you can drill all of these holes and just keep moving the pin up. You can make a bunch of evenly spaced holes. So this thing works great for edges where you can get around like this, but back here I don't have an edge. I've just got a face that I need to match those holes on. On this jig, the edge piece snaps off. So now that I've got that piece off, I can just decide where I want the first hole to be, line it up with this shelf here and drill that hole. Then I can put the pin in that hole and use another piece of wood with a 90-degree angle on it as kind of an edge. Slide this up, put it on the pin, drill those holes, slide it up, put it on the pin, just like I would on the edge. This is the back panel, and I want it to be able to be pushed in from the front side and have a hard stop on the back to cover up all this hidden space in the back of the cabinet. So what we're gonna do is just take some scrap 1x, and I'm actually gonna glue and nail it to this top edge and to the bottom edge so that when you push in that false back from the front, it's got a place to stop. It's also gonna leave a little gap right here in the center so that all those cables can come through. Now I have to make 4 drawers to go in those, and I'm gonna make them the simplest way possible. I've got 1/2-inch plywood I'm gonna use. And so I think I'm gonna pocket hole the front and the back to the side pieces. That way you won't see the pocket holes. One thing about that is, since the material's 1/2-inch, you have to use 1-inch screws. So there's not a lot of surface area, but between the screws and some glue, it should be fine for what we're doing here. So I'm gonna cut these pieces down, add the pocket holes, and then once we get the outer box, we can cut the bottoms and just brad nail them from the bottom. Now it's time to put on some drawer fronts, and there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and it really kind of depends on the type of offset you're gonna have from the outside edges from the other drawer fronts. I've got a 1/2-inch offset over here and a 1/4 inch on the bottom. So basically I went and found some scraps that are 1/2-inch material and 1/8-inch material, which I can stack up to make 1/4 inch material. So I'm gonna use these different offset pieces to get the drawer front in the right position from the outside edge, and then I'm gonna screw it in place. But to hold it in place in the meantime, I'm gonna use some double-sided tape. So we're gonna put double-sided tape on the drawer, get it laid out in the right place and push it on. And then from the back side, we can push the whole thing out, clamp it in place, drive in some screws. It's very easy. We've got our row of drawers in place. They still need pulls on the front of them, but they're good for now. So next up we need to start working on the piece that's gonna hold the false drawer fronts and the flip top. It's all gonna be one thing. So we've got this shell back here, and this is gonna be slid on top of this, leaving this gap up here, about right here. So basically what we need to do is make a piece that's an L shape. That's the top and the front. Get that all fixed together, and then when the hinges show up that I'm waiting on, we can actually hinge it on this face. We'll get to that later on. First, let's get this part made. So we've got another piece of melamine. This is gonna be the false back to the false drawer fronts up top, and it's gonna line up with the existing surface here. Then we're gonna put the other false fronts on these, and then this entire thing will be attached to this top section. And so you'll be able to lift it, and it will flip back and land back there, revealing all the stuff that's going to be on the inside of that. We'll get to that later, but first we need to get this piece and its top section attached. So these two pieces need to be attached to each other, and the best way to do that I can think of right now is to use dowels like we did before on this section. And so we're going to put them in the top of this piece going into the bottom of this piece. That way we'll have a whole bunch all the way along the run. It will lock those two pieces together because eventually you're going to have to lift on this edge to flip the entire thing. So those need to be a really strong connection. Before we do any of the doweling though, I'm going to go ahead and add the hinges. This is called an invisible hinge, and I've used these before on the secret door and on a ping pong table. And the cool thing is that it goes inside two pieces of wood. So it's completely hidden like this, and then it can open up so that the two pieces of wood can move 180 degrees. So it's great for a tabletop that needs to flip completely open or a secret door. And this actually goes inside two pieces of wood. So you have to make a mark across both pieces of wood where the hinge needs to sit. And then it comes with a nice little template that you can use to drill the holes, because you have to drill 2 different depth holes for this thing. Let me just show you how it works. So next up, we're gonna put this false piece in place, add the dowels like I mentioned earlier, and then we'll put on the false drawer fronts on front of them. And at that point, the construction is pretty much done. Then we can move on to the hidden arcade controls that are gonna be in here. First, let me get this thing finished up, and then we'll talk about the controls. These drawer fronts are going to go onto the front the same way we did the other ones, but I wanted to point something out. One of the downsides of using melamine is that if you don't have a specific laminate blade on your saw, it can chip a lot. And you can see back here, there's a lot of chipping on the back of these pieces. That's why I'm using the back. But you can fix it. So with some spackle, you can take just a little bit of the spackle and just kind of wipe it into the little crack in between the surface and the laminate that you put on the outside, the edge banding. And then once that dries, it will fill that space, and then you can do a light sanding and then run over it with a white paint marker, and it pretty much disappears. So it is fixable, but the way around all of that is just to get a laminate blade for your table saw. It's not something I use often enough to buy one, so I didn't use it, and you can tell. All right, let's get these screwed on. Now we need to put the pulls on the front of all these drawers, and I'm going to use this thing that I've used before. I got this when I was working on my kitchen cabinets, and it makes it really easy to make repeatable holes for a set of pulls on a bunch of different drawer faces. Once you get it set up and you have the vertical center and then the horizontal center, you can hold it in place and then drill right through both of these, and it'll put the holes in the right spot. This is our control board for our 4-player arcade. Now we cut this out on the CNC because we've already modeled all this stuff in Fusion, so it was easy to do the layout, the profile, and all that, and just cut it out of a piece of plywood. You could absolutely do it by hand. Some paper templates to cut out all the holes, to drill the holes. Super easy to do. And when we have plans for this cabinet, we'll have that available as well. But now that we've got this, before we start putting on the graphics on the top or putting the buttons or anything in, we need to build an understructure underneath it. And that's because this entire thing is going to slide in and out of the cabinet, so it needs to be on some drawer slides. We've got some drawer slides that go on the ends that have a locking mechanism on them. So as you pull it out, it will lock into place, so while you're playing, it doesn't try to go back. So we need to make a little bit of a structure underneath it to mount those two. So we're gonna put those on the outside and then build some structure, and if we need any more extra support underneath, we can add a couple more drawer slides on the interior section. All right, let's cut down some plywood and pocket hole it into place. So that's pretty much it. Now we have the outside edges where we can put those drawer slides. The little locking mechanism is going to stick out a little bit past it so you can easily lock and unlock it. The last thing we need to do here is take a slot cutting bit and run around this outside profile, and that puts in a little slot where you can knock in some T-molding, just a plastic molding like most arcade cabinets have to protect this outer edge, and it'll dress it up so you don't see the plies. We've also got some graphics coming, and we got to put in all the electronics. But we recently did a live stream where we covered setting up the Raspberry Pi, setting up all the buttons, and getting those things attached. If you want to find out more detail about that process, go check out that live stream. Now we're gonna put some drawer slides on this thing, and I've got these locking drawer slides that are really cool. They've got a little knob sticking out on the front of them, and they're locked in place until you pull that knob down. And once that's out, then you can fully extend them, and they click into place so they are locked in this position. That's gonna be good while we have the control center out so that you can play on it without it trying to move away from you. Then when you're done playing, you just push this down, and it will collapse again and lock into place. So basically they go on just like every other drawer slide, they just have a cool locking feature. So let's get this thing in place. Now we have secret controls. Cool piece of furniture, open it up, cool controls, slide them out, they lock into place, play your games, and then two people can unlock it, close it up. The entire piece of furniture is finished, so let me give you an idea of what we're planning to do with it. We are calling this thing inside the office the Super Arcade because we want to have as many gaming consoles as possible. So down here on these shelves, we're going to put classic consoles, old NES, Atari, all that type of stuff on these shelves, and then we've got these gaps right there in the back corner where we can route all of the wires through from every console. Those are all going to go into this analog video switcher so that we can have them all plugged in all the time to one output that's going to the TV. And when you want to play a console, you just hit the right button and it turns it on to the TV. So we've got all of that down here, and then we have the actual arcade. And this is the Raspberry Pi Arcade. We've done a few of these on the channel, so you've probably seen them before. But we have some graphics that are going to go up here and on the control board, and these are things we got printed at a local print shop. They look great, but also we're going to be adding controls to this board. We've got a lot of buttons, a lot of joysticks. In fact, we bought a set that has a USB controller that these things all plug into. It's very, very simple. We recently did a live stream where I covered all the specifics of getting these things hooked up and setting up the Raspberry Pi, so I'm not going to go over that again. But the live stream is up there if you want to go watch it on the channel. Let me get all this hooked up, and then we can finally play some games. So this thing turned out awesome. It's a great way for us to be able to play games together as a team, whether we're at the arcade or sitting on the couch. And either way, this thing is an awesome way to hide a fully functioning 4-person arcade in your living room. And if you want to make one of these for yourself, we're going to have some plans available, so be sure to hit the link down in the description. And if you make one of those, please send us pictures, because I would love to see it. We've got a lot of other arcade projects, plus a bunch of other types of stuff that you may want to check out. And if you're not subscribed, be sure to do that as well. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Dang it. No, it wasn't. It wasn't what I wanted.
Action.
Mummeline. We're gonna start working on the actual flip tarp. Use shelves with old game consoles. So you push that knob down, and then they'll slide out, fully extend.